Hey there everyone, and welcome back to another video here on Utility Sports. And today we're going to be doing our first video here on the 2021 NBA mock draft. I'm a big draft guru myself. I usually put a lot of work into the mock drafts. My scouting reports last year's was over 140 pages long, so I don't quite have that document going quite yet at this point. But I do know quite a bit about these players already, and we're going to be giving you a way too early edition of a mock. And before we go into that, I just want to remind all of you guys to subscribe if you haven't already. We just hit 1,000 subscribers this past week. Super thankful for all your guys' support. We couldn't be doing it without you, and we'd love to have you aboard if you haven't subscribed already. And hit that notification bell. Being on the Noti train definitely helps us out quite a bit, gets us more consistent views, because otherwise YouTube doesn't recommend our channel to you guys as often as it should be. So if you guys like our content, make sure to hit that notification bell. And now, jumping into the lottery here. I had simmed the lottery, and then I kind of played around a little bit with some of the teams. For example, it had the Washington Wizards at 6. The Wizards are going to be a playoff team in the East, so I took them out of the lottery and kind of moved some of the stuff around here. So that's why some of these look a little different. But Charlotte ended up jumping up to 1, which I thought was interesting. And I kind of like that actually, because it kind of gave a little bit of a wrinkle to this. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with 1 for them. Detroit here at 2. Obviously, that pick could possibly go to the Houston Rockets if they somehow, are out of the top 16, which they won't be. They'll be a top 5 team in the draft. So they got 2. Cleveland, the Cavaliers are at 3. The Chicago Bulls jumped up to 4. The Knicks fell from what was supposed to be 3 to 5. Then we have the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think it's very possible that we see them up in the top 3 here as well. The Sacramento Kings at 7. The San Antonio Spurs at 8, the Orlando Magic at 9, Memphis Grizzlies at 10, the Golden State Warriors via the Minnesota Timberwolves at 11, the Phoenix Suns picking 12, the Atlanta Hawks with all their new additions picking 13th, and now the New Orleans Pelicans picking 14th. And this is a really competitive year, honestly. You're looking at, basically teams 8 through 14 here. I could see possibly sneaking into the playoffs somehow. These teams are very talented. They're just going to be probably just on the outside looking in with how deep the league is this year. So let's jump right into pick number 1. What do the Charlotte Hornets need? To me, positionally, they should be looking at wings and bigs. Obviously, they just added LaMelo Ball to an already, pretty deep backcourt with Terry Rozier and with also, obviously, Devontae Graham. And now you're looking at a pretty formidable trio there of guards. But I still think the franchise needs to go with the best player available. So this is kind of where I ran into a little bit of issues. Could they go Mobley out of USC, or could they go Cade Cunningham out of Oklahoma State? And, Mobley is definitely the better positional fit. You give him that big, the guy who's able to switch out into space. He's averaging 3 blocks a game so far early on in his career at USC. And I think he's going to be a really dominant NBA player as a big. But nonetheless, I had them go with Cade Cunningham. Cade Cunningham shooting over 45% from 3 at this point for Oklahoma State. They've only lost 1 game in his, I believe, 6 or 7 games he's played there. He's an elite playmaker. He's got great size. He's 6'7", so you're looking at a combination of 2 6'7" guards there. Cunningham and LaMelo Ball together would be dangerous on a night-to-night basis. Cunningham's going to be a quality defender. He's going to be a guy that you can put the ball in his hands in the half court. He's really showing himself to be the top player in this class. I almost think it's not close. Honestly, I was a little questioning what his shot would look like. But like I said, he's shooting over 45% from 3 so far on just about 3.5 attempts a game. And he is, doing it off the dribble, off the bounce, going into 1 dribble, 2 dribble pull-ups, switching directions, pulling up into shots. And quite frankly, he's able to take his guy off the dribble rather consistently for Oklahoma State. And I think that he solidified himself as the number 1 selection, regardless of who has the pick. Maybe Charlotte does trade down and get other assets if a team really wants Cunningham. But I think it would be foolish to not take Cunningham at 1. Now into pick 2, we have the Detroit Pistons. Positionally, I think they have needs everywhere. I didn't really love their draft. I didn't like the Isaiah Stewart selection. Didn't like the Killian Hayes selection. Maybe they'll prove me wrong. I did like the Sadiq Bey selection, but I still think that they need to improve their wings quite a bit, especially after trading Luke Kennard. And what does their franchise need? They need superstar potential. So looking kind of at that, I think that they're going to try and plan around having Killian Hayes long-term. So to make that work, they're going to go with Jalen Green. He's a guard-forward combination, playing for the G League this year. He hasn't played yet at all, so we haven't seen him on that stage. But he's a guy who the potential is definitely there. The guy can jump out of the gym. He's a freak athlete. He's able to get his shot off the dribble, able to take guys off the dribble himself to get to the rack. I really like his offensive potential, especially in the half court. And I think that's something the Pistons are really going to need. And I think he fits long-term with the guys they just selected. Obviously, I'm in the camp that thinks that they don't necessarily need to plan that way, plan off of who they selected. But next to Saddiq Bey, a shooter, and a defender, next to Killian Hayes, a point guard, and next to Isaiah Stewart, a center, he fits right in there. He's versatile, can play the 2-3, possibly even the 4 defensively. And I think that he's kind of going to be a home run selection. Obviously, there's a little bit of risk there, and you might be wondering why I don't have them going Mobley. I really like Mobley as a player. I think Mobley is probably a better player than Jalen Green at this point, but I think Green's potential is higher, especially offensively in the half court. So going into pick 3, now we have the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavaliers need a big man. Andre Drummond is an expiring contract. Not sure if he's going to stick around there. Possibly could, but we did see Tristan Thompson depart, so it's kind of 50-50 at this point. And I think they need wings. Obviously, they have Sexton and Garland there. I didn't really love either of those players when they came out. Sexton is looking like a quality guard, not a great guard, just quality. Garland, I'm really, really unsure about, but I think that it's unlikely that they go with a guard in this year's class, because otherwise we could be looking at a guy like Jalen Suggs. And I do think that they need a half-court creator, which would be Suggs, but I just think that they'll not do it. I don't think they'll go that way. I think Kobe Altman will take his own direction. And with Evan Mobley here on the board, that's who they're going to go with. I think he's going to be kind of like what we saw with Onyeka Okongwu this past year. I think he's got a little bit of Bam Adebayo to him. He's switchable out in space, extremely long wingspan. He can protect the rim. Offensively, he's still growing. He's going to be, a guy that maybe has a little bit of a face-up game moving forward. He's going to be a pick-and-roll threat. He's an athletic player. I'm not sure what his offensive, potential really looks like at this point. And as the season goes on, that's something I'll get a little bit better of a feel when I see him a little bit more often. But at this point, defensively, that's really where he's at. I think the Cavaliers really need defensive help. We saw them go get Isaac Okoro. I think this is a step in the right direction. Now they go get the rim protector and Evan Mobley. Now, the Chicago Bulls jump up to 4. This year, obviously, they had the 4th pick and took Patrick Williams. And I still think that they need to look at a wing. I think that they need to look at a point guard. And, for the franchise, I'm trying to think, they have a pretty, filled out roster in terms, like they have a whole bunch of starting level players, but they don't really have guys that, Billy Donovan's brought in yet. I think that's going to be something that they're looking to do. So at this point, they're going to go Jalen Suggs. I think that Kobe White can be a quality scorer offensively, especially as a shooter. I think Zach LaVine's one of the more underrated players in the NBA, to be honest, especially when it comes to half-court capabilities. But I think Suggs is going to be a guy that gives them a little bit different dynamic. He goes north-south really well. I got a question on his shooting touch at this point. It's not really like Cade Cunningham where he's really, emerged as a shooter this year. Suggs has still struggled a little bit, doesn't have much of a pull-up game. I think he's a little more north and south than a lot of these other guys, but he's also a quality playmaker. He's a really quality defender, gets into the passing lanes quite a bit. He's averaging 2.5 steals so far for Gonzaga. Obviously, they just came off a nice win over Iowa in which Suggs put up 27. So he's a really good player. I think Suggs is going to be a good NBA player. I'm not sure exactly if his offensive half-court potential is as high as a guy like Cade Cunningham or Jalen Green. That's why I have him going a little bit lower here. But I think he gives you a lot of good quality things. I think he impacts the game in a lot of different ways. And I quite frankly think that Billy Donovan would love to have him. We saw what Billy Donovan did with a multitude of guards in Oklahoma City. And I think that the Bulls won't shy away from taking a guard this year. Now, at pick 5, we have the New York Knicks, a team with positional needs at the point guard and wing positions, in my opinion, specifically point guard. That's their franchise need. They need a star lead point guard. But with Suggs off the board here, I don't know if that's really viable at pick 5. So I had them go Jonathan Kuminga, the forward out of the G League. Again, we haven't seen him play yet. He's playing on that Ignite team with Jalen Green and Daisha Nix. And I think that he's going to be a player that's really going to rise up some people's boards. We haven't seen him a lot. Didn't really do a lot of U18 tourneys growing up. Didn't do a lot of the younger circuits, especially with COVID. So Kuminga is kind of a little bit of an unknown product at this point, but he's a 6'8" wing. He's got really good athleticism, really good wingspan. I believe 7'2" wingspan. I think defensively there's a lot of upside there, and I think that's something that Tom Thibodeau is going to sell himself on, especially without a lead guard there. Emmanuel Quickly's been playing really well in the preseason. So I think Kuminga's going to be the pick here for the New York Knicks at this point. If they had landed 5 and the board had played the way it does, obviously there's going to be a lot of variation. This is going to change quite a bit. We could see a team like Oklahoma City up here that maybe takes a risk on a guy like Kuminga for his potential. But I think the New York Knicks would roll that. And then you're looking at a big three maybe of RJ Barrett, Obi Toppin, and Kuminga moving forward. And, you got 2 offensive pieces in Barrett and Obi, and now you're adding that defensive wing in Kuminga. Now at pick 6, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder, like I had mentioned. Positionally, they're basically looking at whatever positions available. They're going to be taking best player available. And they need to get a guy with star potential to put alongside Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is one of the most underrated players in the league as well, like I was saying with Zach LaVine. He's going to put up 20 a night this year at least, probably 20 and 6, 20 and 7 maybe. And quite frankly, he's a building block. He's a really, really good building block for them. But they need to get another guy who can shine in the half court. They need to get a defensive presence. And at this point, I have them going Jalen Johnson. He's a forward. He's 6'9", plays for Duke. And he's got a lot of guard skills. He can handle the rock. He's not shooting the best from 3 at this point. I believe right around 33%. But he's able to take guys off the dribble from the perimeter. He's quick with the ball. He's decisive when he's holding the rock. Over the summer as a senior in high school, he was averaging over 3 assists a game for the USA team that he was playing for. So I think that there's a lot of offensive potential there. I think he fits alongside Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's kind of a combo guard. Now they get that combo forward with guard abilities, and I think that that's a really good building block for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Obviously, they have a multitude of selections. But for this lottery mock here, I have them going with Jalen Johnson. Now at pick 7, the Sacramento Kings obviously took Tyrese Halliburton this past year. I really like that selection for them. I just think that out west, they're a little thin yet. I think it's going to be hard for them to compete with some of these other teams. But positionally, they could use a wing. They could use a big man. Obviously, the Marvin Bagley selection is going to come back and haunt them, taking him over Luka Doncic. And I think for their franchise needs, they need either a defensive anchor or a guy that's box office to help bring in some ticket sales, especially once COVID has passed. But it's kind of hard to get that. So at this point, I'm going to have them go Zaire Williams. He's a guy who maybe has that superstar potential to him. He can take guys off the dribble, off the perimeter. He is not shooting the ball well at all right now at Stanford. He's shooting 37% from the field, 32% from 3, I believe. And he's kind of struggled in his first 6 games for Stanford. But I do think that offensive potential is there. He fits into what they're kind of building at this point. They have 2 lead guards in De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton. Obviously, Fox just got extended and Halliburton just drafted. And now you give them that forward that can probably fill in the role of Bogdanovic. He fits alongside Buddy Hield. Harrison Barnes, when they extended him, I was really, really questioning that. And I think that this is kind of a move to replace Harrison Barnes long-term. I think they're going to try and make Marvin Bagley work, especially with this point of the draft, unless they're able to grab a guy like Evan Mobley. Zaire Williams makes a lot more sense than a lot of the other guys on the board. Now into the San Antonio Spurs, a team that's probably looking for a wing. DeMar DeRozan is on an expiring deal this year, just did opt into his player option before the season. So now you're looking at possibly, an interesting situation there. They've got a multitude of guards, obviously DeJounte Murray, Derek White being the 2 lead guards there. And then you also have they just brought in Aaron Nesmith. Or no, they didn't bring in Nesmith. Sorry, that's the Celtics. They brought in Devin Vassell, a player I had really liked in the draft process. I think he's going to be one of the best players from the class, but I still think that they're going to look for a wing. I don't think Vassell is going to be a super big contributor this year. I think he'll probably score around 7 to 10 points a game. So I think they're still going to long-term look for that, especially with Jakob Poeltl under contract for 3 years. And I think they need a transcendent half-court player. They need to really bolster that offense. And going into next year, they're going to take a risk on BJ Boston. He can play the guard or the forward spot. And he's, kind of struggled a little bit at Kentucky. I'm not going to lie. I thought Kentucky was going to be better this year. They are 1-5 right now, just had a bad loss to the UNC Tar Heels. And it doesn't look good for Kentucky this season. But I think BJ Boston has a lot of different traits that NBA GMs are going to like. He gives some half-court shot-making ability. Now, he's got a ways to go. Don't get me wrong. There's potential there. I don't think he's going to come in and be a really great offensive player immediately, but I think he's got a lot of different options there. Teams are running a lot of zone against Kentucky. That's something we won't see really as much in the NBA. For Boston, I think that kind of fits his skill set a little bit better, playing against man-to-man defense. Jumping into the 9th selection here, we have the Orlando Magic, a team that's going to need a shooting guard. Evan Fournier opted into his player option. I don't really see him coming back after this season. And they could also use a forward, Jonathan Isaacs, on an expiring deal, obviously tore his ACL, so we won't even see him this year. But they're going to look to replace him. Aaron Gordon's been on the trade market for a while, so you don't really know what that looks like. And I think they're going to need to also address half-court offense. We saw them take a chance with Cole Anthony. I think he's going to help their half-court offense, but I think they still need to take strides in that area. And I'm going to mock Scotty Barnes to them. He's a versatile forward. He's going to be able to play the 3 or 4 offensively, can play the probably the 2 through 4 defensively. And he kind of fits a lot of those needs for the Magic. He's going to give them some half-court scoring. He's not the most consistent shooter at this point, but he's able to take his guy off the dribble. He's an athletic wing, and with the likely departure of Jonathan Isaac, a Florida State wing, they'll bring in another Florida State wing here. We've seen them do this before, stay in state, take a Florida player, and that's what they're doing here with Scotty Barnes. I think this makes a lot of sense, and I think this is a pretty good landing spot for Scotty Barnes too. Gives him some time to develop. They've got some pieces there already with Vucevic and Cole Anthony, as well as Markelle Fultz, and I think Scotty Barnes will be the selection here for the Magic. Pick 10 now, I have the Memphis Grizzlies here. A team that I think really succeeded last year. I really am high on John Morant. I think John Morant's a transcendent player. I just think the rest of their roster is not filled out quite enough. I think they need more depth on the wing and the front court. And I also think they need to add more shooting. Obviously, Jaren Jackson can shoot the ball. John Morant's improving as a shooter, but I think that they could use a little bit more of an upgrade there shooting. But I am going to have them go Day'Ron Sharpe out of UNC. He's a center. I think they need some more front court depth. Brandon Clark's kind of that combo big where he plays forward and center a little bit, but I think Sharpe gives them a little bit more depth, especially as a rebounder. He's really playing well for UNC this year as a true freshman, and I think that he makes a lot of sense. He gives them another screen and roll guy behind Valanciunas. Obviously, Valanciunas has 2 years left on his deal at this point, will be 1 year left, so you kind of draft that long-term replacement who's going to be cheaper and maybe gives them some salary cap flexibility moving forward. Now into pick 11, this is the Golden State Warriors from the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I think positionally, they just need to look at replenishing some of their depth that they lost when they brought in Kevin Durant. Obviously, we've seen them kind of do that a little bit, bringing in Oubre and Wiggins on their wings. Obviously, Klay Thompson's out right now, but you're looking at a pretty formidable lineup. Went with James Wiseman, so I don't think center's the biggest need. And I think that honestly, for their franchise, they should take a risk on a hit or miss guy at this point if their pick does fall to 11 from the Wolves. And that hit or miss guy to me is Josh Christopher. Really not shooting the ball well from 3 for Arizona State, shooting 23% from 3 at this point. But I mean, the guy can get his shot off at any point in the game, and he can really handle the rock, able to exceed in the mid-range game. He's averaging around 15 points a game for Arizona State at this point when I'm making this video. And he's got a lot of different tools to be an elite NBA offensive player, in my opinion. He can get to the rack. He's a creative finisher below and above the rim. He's decisive in his moves when he is attacking from the perimeter. Really good at stopping on a dime and pulling up in the mid-range area. I think that's a lost art in today's NBA, and I think he would give them a little bit of a wrinkle in that offense there for the Warriors, something that, Wiggins doesn't necessarily live that way. He's more of a true slashing type, although he is pretty successful at that. And Oubre is way more of a true slashing type with some outside shooting ability. And I think Christopher gives them another wrinkle into that offense. It kind of reminds me of Kevin Porter Jr. Obviously, we saw Porter Jr. go 30th, and not a lot of mocks are really putting Christopher this high. And I think that Christopher, there's a shot that he's Dion Waiters from this class. I'm not going to lie. There's a shot that he just doesn't pan out. But at the same time, I think he's got a lot of different tools that NBA GMs are going to be looking at. And he's an athletic wing. He's going to be able to guard the 2 and 3 early on in his career, maybe even the 4 once he bulks up a little bit more. And he's going to be showtime. I think he would fit perfectly on that bench immediately. Gives them a little bit more depth. Kind of reminds me of Alec Burks early on. But I think that his ceiling is far, far higher than an Alec Burks. Now into pick 12, we have the Phoenix Suns. Obviously, they brought in Chris Paul. And I think that they need to look at getting some more backcourt depth and also some wing depth. They went with Jalen Smith this year. in the draft. I think that they should have maybe went with a Vassell, but it's okay. They ended up going with a big man, which was a need for them losing Aaron Baines. But for me, I see KNICKS as the selection. He's going to be a long-term backup to Chris Paul while he's there. And then once Chris Paul is gone, maybe he takes over that lead point guard role. He's a 6'4" point guard. He's creative with the dribble. We haven't seen him yet in the G League, obviously. He's part of that Ignite team that I had mentioned earlier. But he's a guy that's able to get his shot off, maneuver in the pick and roll, go north-south quite a bit. And he's crafty with the ball. He can – I don't really like saying that too much, but he is a guy that's going to be able to dribble in tight spaces, create separation for himself. And a lot of people aren't seeing him go this high either. And I think there's a shot that him playing for the G League Ignite team could actually hurt him. Obviously, we're going to see a lot more Jalen Green and Jonathan Kuminga offensively over Knicks, so that's something that could hurt him. But he's also got pieces there to facilitate too. I think that's something he's going to be able to prove as himself as a facilitator this year. And I think that's why I see the Suns going with him at 12. Now, pick 13 of the Atlanta Hawks. Obviously, they went out and got a lot of quality players this year. Bogdan Bogdanovic, Rajon Rondo, Chris Dunn on a one-year deal. Also, they've got, Danilo Gallinari. But I still think that they could use some more depth, and I think they need perimeter defenders. It's kind of hard at this point in the draft to really, see who's going to be that elite perimeter defender at this point, though. So I'm going to have them go Moses Moody. He's going to be a competitive defender, although I don't think he's going to be an elite perimeter defender. And Arkansas has really become known as a team that can produce shooters. Moses Moody's going to be another guy who can really shoot the rock. He's going to be able to play the 2 early on in his career, maybe the 3 if he bulks up a little bit more. He is 6'5". We saw this with Isaiah Joe out of Arkansas this past year as a really quality shooter, and Moody's kind of taken that role offensively at Arkansas, and I think that he's going to give the Hawks some shooting flexibility. Maybe Bogdanovic moves over to the 3, something he hasn't done yet at this point. Obviously, that's why the Buddy Hield Bogdanovic thing didn't work out in Sacramento, but I think that might be the move that needs to happen for the Hawks. Cam Reddish and DeAndre Hunter obviously fulfilling the 3 at this point, and with Onyeka Okongwu there, I don't see them going big man. They're paying a lot of money for a backup 4 to Danilo Gallinari, so I think shooting guard's really the only likely selection. This could be a trade down. They might be looking to package pick 13 with a player, or whatever pick they end up with a player on their roster to kind of improve, which I think would make a lot of sense. But if they do keep the pick, I see Moody as a likely selection out of Montverde. Now the Pelicans as the final pick here in this lottery mock. I think they positionally need a wing really bad. I think they need some shooting. And I'm going to go with Matthew Hurt, the forward out of Duke. He's kind of more of a true power forward than a small forward, which you might be wondering why I would take a power forward for New Orleans. But he's a guy who's going to be able to stretch the floor as a big. He's kind of like Nico Melli, but a more consistent shooter. He's shooting the ball over 40% from 3 at this point when I'm making the video. Career 39% shooter from 3 at Duke in his 2 years now. And he's really stepped up his game. He went from averaging 9.5 points per game last year to up to over 18 points per game this year for the Duke Blue Devils. And I think that he's a guy he was recruited really highly out of high school, out of Minnesota. And now we're seeing him kind of, step up his game offensively. He can really put the ball in the hoop. That's the biggest thing about him. And I think the Pelicans are going to be looking for guys who can do that in the half court, can create for themselves and shoot the ball. And I think Hurt gives them a lot of those options. And I think his fit next to Zion Williamson offensively is really great. Defensively, I'm a little unsure about it. Stan Van Gundy's obviously more of a defensive-minded head coach, but I think they need more offensive help there. They have a lot of defensive players at this point, and Hurt gives them some of that offensive flexibility and kind of improves their team overall. So that's going to be the lottery mock here. If you guys did enjoy, make sure to like the video, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and let us know down in the comments below who you think will go in the lottery this year that I didn't have in this video. If there's any that I missed, please let me know. Obviously, I'm still kind of working on putting this whole class together, trying to build on my top 25. And, not every player I mocked here. I don't think Matthew Hurt's necessarily the 14th best player in the class. I just think that's kind of the fit that I was looking for. And if you guys did enjoy, like I said, hit that like button, and we'll catch you in the next video.